Okay, great. Um, all right. So most of this training is going to be demo, so there's not a lot of slides, but I do want to just show you what the overall architecture of what we're building is, um, and just a quick overview of how it works. So what assistants are is different from what you've built on FlowXO before. So previously, with the AI tools like the knowledge base or some of the other AI tools, you would still build a conversation flow using the flow builder. Um, and the flow builder would control the conversation, and then you could have the AI do specific parts of that, for instance, answering a question. With AI assistants, you don't usually have to build much flow logic. You describe how you want the assistant to work in just natural language in a prompt, and the assistant takes care of managing the flow of the conversation. Um, so that actually makes it quite a bit easier, especially for non-coding types, to build out the logic that they want, and we'll see what that looks like as we get into it. A couple of the other things that make assistants powerful is that they come with a built-in memory. So you are kind of able to cobble this together by loading a chat transcript before and feeding it into your prompt, but it only kind of worked. The assistants have just a built-in memory of the conversation. It can be up to 50 messages long. So that makes them able to keep context. And so when users ask follow-up questions that don't provide all the context, like, can you tell me more about that? The assistant will know how to respond, or it can refer back to previous parts of the conversation as necessary. And so the main component of an assistant is its instructions that tells it how to behave, but what gives its power and its abilities are its ability to use tools. And tools, as you'll see, are just pieces of functionality. They can be flows that you build. It can be knowledge base, reading a web page, a whole variety of different types of things. And the assistants will decide when the right time to use a tool is. And so that lets the assistants do anything that you could previously do in FlowXO, but in a generally much simpler way. And then another pretty powerful aspect of assistants is that they can use each other as tools. So, excuse me. Um, you What you'll generally end up doing as your assistants evolve and become more complex is you'll end up creating a suite of different assistants. And the reason for that is that AI is really smart, but just like a person, it can really only hold so many instructions at one time before it starts to get confused. So the best way to build these things is to pick different aspects, different workflows, put them into an assistant, and then have them use each other. Just like in a normal company, you would have specialists that do different aspects of a job, and they'll collaborate and coordinate with each other. So that's really what the assistants are. And then today we're going to be building a customer service assistant, not quite from scratch, but close. I had to pre-build some things in the interest of time, but we'll also share a template where you can load the whole thing, including all the flows that are used, into your account at once and play with it if you want to. So the goal of our customer service assistant that we're going to build today is to pretty straightforward answer questions about products and services, just like you would with a knowledge base, and then also have the ability to escalate any kind of support questions that the bot isn't able to answer, or if they're having trouble, can escalate to either a ticket or live chat. And the components that we're going to be using in this demo are the customer service assistant, the main assistant, that will be using knowledge-based tools, a HTTP tool to call out to an API, be able to query a web page, transfer to support, which will be another assistant, and then ban users in case they end up being inappropriate. Then the escalation assistant, which will just be a sub assistant of the main one, will be able to transfer to live chat, create a ticket in a help desk, and update the user profile. with the email that it collects. And then finally, I'll show how to use a conversation completed handler, which is just a normal flow that can run after the assistant is done with its job. And it can do things like write data collected during the process to a CRM or anywhere else you want to go. In this case, we'll just do a Google Sheet, but you can put the data anywhere you want. And then we'll touch on deployment. So there's a bunch of different ways you can deploy these, and we'll show a few of them. All right, so that's it. Here's some resources that Yasin will send in the chat, and we'll also send an email afterwards with these. So these are just articles that you can use. So let me go right into it. All right, can you guys see my screen okay? Are we on, we on FlowXO? Is that what you see?
Yeah, all good.
Okay. All right. So I have pre-built these, but I'm gonna rebuild the customer support assistant from scratch just to show how it's done. It's really one thing I wanted to mention first is that when you install this template, you're going to need a knowledge base with at least some data in it for it to work properly. In the interest of time, I just loaded our website and help center into here. You will obviously have your own. So that's something that if you want to use the template, you'll need to set up a knowledge base, and we'll send a link on how to do that if you don't already know. All right. So creating a new assistant is, of course, you give it a name. The description is just for your own organization. It's optional. And then one important aspect is that you give your assistant a goal. The goal is used by the AI, as the assistant's going to try and work towards that goal. It also helps you sort of focus your assistant on the job that you want to do. Like I said, you don't want to have a giant assistant that does 15 different, completely different workflows. And so when you design your goal, it helps you focus on what is the specific thing that you want that assistant to do. And in this case, we're just going to ask it to answer a user's question or resolve an issue. Very simple. Then you're going to create a persona for your assistant. This can be as simple as, the classic hello world of AI, you are a helpful assistant. Usually you're going to want to give it a little bit more personality and guidance than that. In this case, we're going to give it a name. We're going to say your name is Flo. You work for FlowXO, a little bit about the company that she's working for, and a little bit of personality. You're fun and friendly, like to give out fun facts from time to time, and you like to use emojis. So, you can use this to take some trial and error, but you can really create a lot of different types of voices and personalities. You can make it a pirate if you want. So this is something that you'll want to play with if you're not happy with the tone of your assistant or the voice that it's using. And then the instructions is the heart of your assistant. This is where you tell it what it is and how it should work. And you can structure this in many, many different ways. So if in another training, we'll talk more about more workflow heavy assistants, like a lead qualification assistant that needs to ask specific questions in specific orders. And you might design that differently. In this case, with like a customer service assistant, I just like to give it rules that it needs to follow. And so I'm going to go over a couple of these because they can be important. So the first one is answer any questions that you have about pricing using our webpage. So this is an interesting example of being able to use these assistants to answer different questions in different ways. So we have a bunch of articles, help articles on our website, and some of them have examples from the past before we changed our pricing. And so the knowledge base would sometimes use our current pricing and sometimes use old pricing that it found in some random like conversation history in an article example. And so to combat that, we're just telling it that anytime you get a question about pricing, look it up on our webpage. Don't bother with the knowledge base. But any other questions should come from our knowledge base. And we're asking it not to make up anything, just only answer what it gets from the knowledge base to help prevent hallucinations. We're telling it that it can engage in small talk and answer general knowledge questions like, how to make good pizza. But we don't really want our bot to be abused. And so oh, I jumped ahead. Sorry, that'll come later. In this case, we're just telling it that it can use small talk, but don't discuss competitors, other companies, their products or services, and just direct them to the other company's website if that's what they're asking about. The user description.
Nathan, sorry, before we move along, help us understand the syntax of why you got the your rules header there with the pound signs. Is that important?
It can be. So I always like to use markdown headers for the different sections. The AI training has been trained on a lot of markdown. It does help differentiate the different sections better than if you just start writing rules. So it's nothing. We don't have anything internal that has any understanding of the headers, but the AI itself will sometimes perform better when you do it that way.
So as a best practice, use markdown syntax then.
Yeah, and also, as you'll see when we save this, we show the instructions in markdown, and so it'll also help visually for you to understand how this works.
Right.
Okay, and then there's the user description. So the user description is totally optional. It's where if you want to tell the AI who your user is, you can. So you can say this user arrived at our website through our pricing page or whatever. You can also have variables in here. And we'll send a link on how to use these, but these can get pulled from the user profile attributes and a couple of various other places, metadata, such as like the web page that the bot's hosted on. So in this case, we're telling it to use the user's language, which if you're on the web, will get just automatically detected. And if we know their name, then we'll tell the bot what their name is already. All right, so default model, this is the model that you want to use. For the main assistant, I almost always use GPT-4. You can try with GPT-3.5. In fact, with a customer assistant bot like this, it probably work. When you have more complicated processes and workflows and steps that it needs to follow, 3.5 just usually doesn't do it. But as I'll show in a little bit, you don't have to use the same model for every aspect. So you can use 3.5 for like question answering if you want, but still keep 4 for your main assistant who's making the decisions. The AI connection is just whether or not you're going to use credits or not. And then you can decide how many history messages you want to keep. It'll be cheaper and faster if you keep this low. You can go all the way up to 100. But in most bot conversations from what we've seen, 10, 25 is usually plenty. People aren't usually needing to ask questions too far back in their history. And then output fields, we're actually not going to discuss a whole lot right now, but this is the data that the bot will output. We'll show it a little bit in the Escalation Assistant, and then the tools. So for now, we're just going to add a knowledge base.
Nathan, before you proceed,
Yes.
Augusto had a question to ask.
Okay, I'm concerned about time. I wonder if we should save the questions for the end, Yasin?
I mean, that could work. It's just like you answered that, and
yeah, no
that
problem.
is why. Maybe like one, unless like it's important, Augusto, like you say.
At the end,
I can
fine.
At
answer one more
the end,
at the end. Okay, we'll
Okay,
do it at the end. All right. So these are some pretty important fields here. So when you add a tool, you have to give it a name. You should give it a descriptive name because the AI will understand the name. So migrate tool is a bad name. Knowledge base makes sense. It knows what a knowledge base is. And then a description should say how the tool is going to be used, any rules around when it should be called. In this case, it's pretty simple. We're just going to use it to answer questions. And then you can, if you want, pick specific knowledge bases. If you don't, it'll just query all of your knowledge bases at once. And then there's a couple of different modes here, which I'm not going to go to in great detail, but so the search mode is just like the most basic, simple knowledge base mode. when it calls the knowledge base tool, it's just going to search the knowledge base, get the data back, and the assistant itself will compose the answer. So that's fine unless you want the thumbs up, thumbs down feedback, or you want to use a different model, like 3.5 for your question answering. And so because if we choose answer question, then what the assistant will be doing when it uses this tool is actually asking the knowledge base to provide an answer, not raw data, and then it'll just incorporate that answer. So I'm going to use that here because the defaults are usually fine. And the reason is I want to use 3.5 Turbo for the question answering, mostly for speed purposes, but when you're doing this for real, cost is also a concern. We will request feedback, and then various tools may have a bypass assistant field. This is actually kind of important. If you choose to bypass the assistant, then the result that the tool provides will be just sent directly to the user. It won't be sent back to the assistant to interpret and regurgitate. So whether or not you use this really depends on your use case, but for just simple question answering, if your assistant doesn't have, like, if you're not asking it to talk like a pirate or have a very specific voice, it can be faster and less expensive just to have the knowledge base send directly to the user. If you are finding that there's instructions you have in your main assistant that aren't being followed, you can not use this feature. And that's all there is to that. So, oh, shoot. I shouldn't have done that. All right, I'm going to do this fast. All right, so we have our knowledge base, and then we also asked the assistant to use a web page to answer pricing questions. All right, so now it can do that. That's really all we have to say. In this case, I'm also going to use Turbo, and I'm also going to bypass the assistant for the exact same reasons. Okay, so this is a good first shot at this. We're going to go create it. And so now this is the view page. This is what I was saying about the markdown. It's much easier if you use proper markdown to see what your assistant's instructions are. And then there's all the other, settings that we set. And now we can test. You can test here with this test button. You can click Test Assistant up here. And this test console is going to just load the assistant that you're working on. It's not the normal test console that uses like the entire kitchen sink in your account. It's just specific to this assistant. So there it is. Announces itself, asks how it can help. What are your support hours? There's your support hours. What is an AI credit? And so it's doing what the knowledge base was doing before in answering questions. If I ask what the pricing is, then I could show you that is going to actually load that from our website and not from the knowledge base. All right, so nice complete answer there. All of that was using GPT 3.5, except for the main assistance logic, which was using 4. And so let's see what was going on behind the scenes there. So I'm going to go to the run history and go to this one right here that just happened. And this page will show you the total cost of this conversation. It was 2.5 cents, which is really thanks to using GPT 3.5 for the question answering. And then you can see each step in the conversation here. You can see where the knowledge base was called, what it returned. And then here, where we asked about pricing, we can see that it did not call the knowledge base, it called the query web page, which loaded from our website. You can also, if you click on the blue responses, let's find well, because we were using 3.5, it's not a good example. So in any case, the point is you can click on these and see often more details about what was going on. If your bot was having any particular thoughts at the time, it will explain its thinking process here. All right, so that's all we're going to look at that on that for now. So now we're going to add in escalation. So in this case, what we decided to do is escalate conversations that need a human's interaction through another assistant. And so I've built this already, this escalation assistant, which you can look at when you install the template. Got more people in the waiting room. Sorry, that got slightly sidetracked. So the reason that we're using a separate, there's a live chat tool, and you can just throw the live chat tool in your main assistant, and then if someone asks to talk to an agent, it will use the live chat tool, it will go straight to live chat. But in this case, I wanted to show that sometimes you want a more complicated, process, more full-featured process behind, for instance, transferring someone to a support channel. And so one thing that you'll find is you're using tools with these assistants is the assistants really like to call their tools. So when I was building this example and working with some other customers that are using this early, it was pretty hard to get the assistant to stop and ask questions before sending to the live chat tool, because it was just so eager to do that. So one way to solve that is to create another assistant that upfront has a process before going to the live chat tool, and then send the conversation to that assistant. The other reason for this is that in this example, we wanted to offer people the option to go to a ticket or to live chat in case they didn't feel like doing a live chat and they just wanted a more, email centric approach to support. And so if you install the sample, you can go through this. This one's actually pretty, it's pretty sophisticated, and it has a number of different steps and demonstrates some best practices for a more workflow driven assistant. I'll just quickly sort of show you how this is designed here. We have various different processes, and each process has a set of simple steps that relate very specifically to that process. And then as far as if you need it to branch to do one thing in one situation, another thing in another situation, those are each described as a different process. And we just tell the assistant to go to which process it needs to under which conditions. So this is way too much to go over in detail in this particular training, but I will show you how it works. So, and we'll integrate it into our customer service assistant. All right, so the first thing we'll do is just add an assistant tool. I will call it transfer to support. And we need to give it a good description. Again, this isn't just, there we go, assistant, transfer to support. These names and descriptions, it's really important to remember that these are not just to help you organize your tools. These are what is used by the assistant to decide when and how to call them. So we're telling it to use this to escalate to the support team. And we're also telling it that it can escalate to the support team because the user specifically asked to talk to a human, or because they're getting frustrated or not getting an answer to their problem. So the assistant will use some autonomy to determine when it should do that. All right. And we're going to add an input parameter. So the input parameters are what data is going to be sent to the assistant. In this case, we're just going to say reason for transfer. And we're going to just be text. Oops, I used the wrong naming convention. Reason for transfer. And for the description, we're going to say, please provide a complete description of the reason the user needs support. We'll make that required. So now whenever this tool gets called, that will get filled in by the AI. Okay, the assistant is going to be our escalation assistant. We're going to use GPT-4 for this one too. And in this case, there's two different things that can happen when an assistant is called as a tool. You can either wait for the response. So you might have an assistant whose job is to collect like email and phone number, but that's all it does. And then this assistant takes back over and uses that information to move forward. In this case, though, once someone goes to support, we're really transferring them. So just like if you had an operator or answer your phone and they were to ask a few questions and then transfer them to another person to finish the conversation, that's what this is analogous to. All right, so we've done that. And then we're also going to add another rule to our instructions here to relate to this. So we're going to say if the user gets frustrated, ask for a human, then transfer them to the support tool. So that's all we're going to do there. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to demonstrate the user getting frustrated with the conversation. You can do that if you decide to play with the template. I'm just going to go ahead and ask to be transferred. Actually, let me do it a different way. So my bot isn't working. All right, provide some troubleshooting steps here, probably from the knowledge base. And none of that is working. All right, so so now it is this. You can't tell, but it's transferred to the escalation assistant because it's asking me for my email address. So none of this is in the current customer service assistant. It's all in the escalation assistant. So the handoff did happen. And I might not go through this whole process right now. So, all right, a support ticket is created. And that's because I already provided the reason. So that that shows the sub assistant. All right, moving right along. So now I want to talk about dealing with users that aren't behaving the way that you expect them to. So the first scenario that we're going to look at is like if you publish this on your website or wherever else, it has the full power of OpenAI's GPT behind it. So people can just use it for free chat GPT if they want to. Like they can ask their question, they can ask it to write them poems, they can ask it to write them blog articles, whatever, right? But that's not really, you don't really want them using your bot for that. There's no reason for you to pay for their GPT use. So, but on the other hand, you don't want to be too restrictive so that, they can't have a natural conversation with your bot. So we're going to address that with just a simple rule. And that rule is going to say, although you may stray off topic, you will always attempt to steer the conversation back to FlowXO. Keep a counter in your scratch pad of off-topic conversations. If the counter reaches 3, stop answering off-topic questions entirely and just say, let's talk about FlowXO. So there's a concept in here that I'll discuss briefly, which is the scratch pad. So every assistant has basically a place where it can take notes for itself that aren't shown to the user, and you can ask the assistant to use that in this case to keep a counter of off-topic conversations. So let's try it. Oh, great. demo. All right. What is the difference between pi? All right. So it answers the question and then sort of tries to steer the conversation back to FlowXO. We're going to ignore that. What is an elephant? There's what an elephant is. Again, trying to steer the conversation back. Why is grass green? So this is the third question. This should trigger our rule. Nope. Maybe it's above 3. What is a cloud? All right, let's talk about FlowXO. Let's ask another one. How do I make pizza? All right, so it's done. It's done with that. You can also just tell it not to answer off-topic questions, but this gives a little bit more flexibility in case you want to, like, let the user play a little bit, but not go overboard. So that's one scenario. Another scenario is users that are just spamming your bot with garbage, just hitting random keys. This does happen, believe it or not, and it can be kind of expensive. So we can solve this with a simple rule as well. All right, if a user starts randomly typing in garbage or nonsense, they're probably abusing the system. Also keep a counter, and then we're going to temporarily ban the user if that happens. And so this is really is here to demonstrate how we can build another tool that can do this for us. So right now, there's no way for the bot to ban a user. So we're going to have to add a flow to enable that capability. So that's what we'll do. And I have this pre-built because it takes a minute, but I'll show you how it works. So there's temporarily ban user. So when you build a custom tool for your assistant, it'll always start with a new trigger. And so all we're doing in this is we don't know what language the user is going to be using. So the first thing we'll do is we're just going to translate our message, which is basically signing off. We're not being too polite here. They're not being nice to the bot. So we're just going to translate signing off to the language that they're using. We're going to send them that message. And then we're going to use the utilities to switch their status to banned. And then we're going to wait. In this case, I'm just waiting 1 minute, but you could wait any amount of time, and then we're going to unban them. You don't have to unban them, but we're going to do that just so that they can start using the bot if they decide to behave better. And then now that we have that flow, we can integrate it in as a tool. And this time, the type of tool that we're going to use is a flow tool. Temporarily ban user. And tell it, give it a description. And in this case, because we're waiting for a minute, we're going to transfer control. Actually, we're just going to continue the conversation. This means that the assistant isn't going to wait for that response. It's just going to end. The trigger type is direct, and we're going to use our temporarily ban user flow. All right. So now we can test this. All right, so it's done. And now for the next minute, it's not able to communicate. So this is not using up any credits, it's just ignoring these messages. After a minute, the timer would re-enable them. So if they came back after an hour and had a legitimate use for the bot, they could use it. Okay. There's also a scenario, and I'm not going to go into depth on this, but it's usually good to have a rule in here, especially if you do have a ban user option. So if the user becomes abusive or mean or whatever else, you don't really want to send them to your support team. If they're behaving like that, we're just going to straight up ban them. All right, so actually I might pause briefly for questions because we're going to move on to deployment next. So this went real fast, I realize that, but we are through the basic assistant building part of this training. Anyone have any questions before we move on? All right, Augusto, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Nathan. Can you actually use variables in the text that the agent is providing? I mean, in the response from ChatGPT, maybe I didn't see it, but in the case of the escalation ticket, so that it can provide, for example, the number of the escalation ticket to the user.
So yes and no. The messages that the AI produces are generated by the language model. So there's no way to insert variables into that. However, if you tell the AI to respond with a ticket number, it will do that as long as it knows what that ticket number is. So when you build a flow to create the ticket, that flow returns a ticket number, and you in your instructions you say, respond with the ticket number. It will do what you ask it to do. And if you tell it to say an exact phrase, like say, thank you, your ticket has been created with ticket number, it will also do that. So, yes is the answer to your question, but not in like a strict way like you would in a normal flow where you just put in a variable and we replace it. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, you have to play actually with the prompt in order for the LLM to use that number.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on this before I move on to deployment? Looks like Dallas says.
Yeah, help me understand what happens to intents from now on, intent detection.
So intent detection plays a much smaller role if you're using assistants than it did in the past. So intents were a way to add natural language processing into the flow, into the more rigid sort of workflow-based conversational agents. But the assistants do a great job of intent detection on their own. And so the combination of your prompting and tool use to a large extent can eliminate the need for intents. You can still use them with assistants, but they don't have as big of a role to play.
Yeah, we're finding in our production system anyway, the intent detection isn't as reliable as I was hoping it would be. So would I be best advised to take all of our 20 or 30 intents and put them in a static knowledge base text file and rely on AI assistants to do a better job parsing them?
Yes. So the AI assistants, so the reason that you had put those into intents is because if I remember correctly, the knowledge base wasn't answering questions the way that you wanted, because it had your whole knowledge base of data and it wasn't picking out the right stuff. So the great thing about the assistants is that if you put that stuff into their own knowledge base or into just a web page or whatever else you want, you can tell the assistant can use 7 different knowledge bases as different tools. So you can say, in this scenario, answer the question from here, and it will definitely do a better job than if it was could only had one knowledge base or set of knowledge bases to look at and had to answer those questions from the whole set of data. That sounded confusing when I said it. I don't know if it was.
I'm looking forward to do some tests and see if that is in fact the case.
Okay, good. And Dallas, reach out to us as you're doing that if you're having trouble with it, because we're happy to help. Now is a good time while we're building this stuff.
Yep.
We're very eager to hear that feedback.
Awesome.
All right. I'm going to move on to deployment. So right now we've been testing in the assistant test console. That doesn't get it in front of your users. So there's several different ways that we can deploy this. So the first and the most straightforward is to just create a bot. Call it flow. Flow from flow. FlowXO, how can I help you? And we can assign it the assistant that we created. And then that's all there is to that. And now that bot will use that assistant as its default. It'll still show the welcome message, which is usually faster and less expensive than having your assistant introduce itself. There's really no reason to have the LLM like construct an introduction message. You might as well just do this. But then after that, it's the assistant that's in charge. So if you don't need to really monkey with the flow builder for some specific reason, this is often the easiest way to go. But it isn't the only way. So the other way that we can do it is to create a catch-all flow like you would have done in the past with the knowledge base. And so this is useful if you want to give some options, for instance, to your user. So what we're going to do real quick here is we're going to say, hi, I'm Flo. How can I help you today? And we're going to provide just some what are support hours, some suggestion. And then we only want this message to get shown on the first time they connect. Where's equals 1 of? There it is. So we're going to limit it to the start message, and we're going to end the flow if that's the case. Otherwise, if it's not a start message, then we will run an assistant, and we will run our customer support assistant that we just built. We do have to connect the message from the catch-all, and then you can set other things here, including the model temperature and a couple of other settings, but I'm not going to go into those right now. And then that is another way that you can deploy these. This is also a way that you can integrate assistants into your existing workflows. So you don't have to use a catch-all. You can start an assistant wherever you want. You can start them from an intent. You can start them from a menu. And so, this provided our sample questions, but again, once the intro is done, the control will be passed to the assistant. All right. So like I said, there's actions to start assistants from intent. So if you have an intent detector, which we don't for this example, you can use an intent to start, and an assistant. You can also do that with the menus. So if you're using a menu and you have an action for, we'll say something like process or return, you can have a specific assistant handle that message. which I'm not going to show right now, but that option is available. All right, so the one thing that I have this here in my notes, but we already went over it. The one thing I do want to emphasize that you really want to remember is that you can use the different models for different places, different tools in your assistant. Almost everywhere, almost every tool that uses AI will allow you to pick the model. Do you guys want to talk about the different built-in tools, or do you want to explore that for yourselves? Just by like who wants to talk about the various tools right now real quick, or do you want to look at that later? Raise your hand if you want to. Okay, I have one. Oh no, everyone. Okay, so let's do that right quick. And I'll just go through the list of available tools that we have. All right, the knowledge base tool we already looked at. Queries your knowledge base. Live chat will direct the users to your live chat system. Also very straightforward. So query a web page we also showed that can read any web page on the internet, and then it'll answer the question based on that web page. So if your assistant has access to a URL, you can tell it which URLs that it can access. It can read current data out of a web page, which can be useful in a lot of different scenarios. Text to speech, so your assistant can talk. You can give it an instruction to always speak a response, in which case it'll convert the output to an audio clip, which in the web bot will just play automatically, and Telegram and others it'll just have a play button. Can generate images from using DALL-E 3. They're pretty amazing. If you haven't played with DALL-E 3, you should. They're very cool. Can call assistants, can call flows, which we've shown both of that. It can send a menu. So if you have a main menu, one of your instructions to your assistant can be send the main menu, and it'll show the menu. It can look up the current time, which sounds like, why would it need to do that? There's actually a number of different scenarios where you want it to have the current time. And then HTTP is the last one. That one's pretty interesting. In fact, I plan to show that, and I think I will. So a lot of the times your integrations with external systems, you don't necessarily need to build a whole flow out for it. As long as it has a simple HTTP API, you can do it straight from here. And so what I'm going to do is add into our assistant the ability to give fun facts. So I found a little fun fact database. We'll just say get fun fact. The description is going to just tell it to get these from time to time. And then there's the URL. So this is just a super simple API that just it just goes to this URL and gets a fun fact in JSON format. But you can set the headers. You can use variables in here that from the input parameters. So if you had, let's say, I don't know, get user profile from your own web page, you could put user ID equals user ID, and then you would add the input user ID, and then it would call that API with that variable filled in. So this is actually pretty flexible and pretty powerful. And you can also add multiple different authorizations in here, depending on what your authorization scheme is. So this is simpler than having to build a flow in a lot of different integration scenarios if you're using web-based services. In this case, though, this is all we need. And so that's probably all it's going to take. So we should be able to ask our assistant for a fun fact now.
You don't need an instruction for that, the assistant?
You really don't always have to have an instruction. It looks like, is that you, Fabio, raising your hand?
Sorry.
Not
Sorry, it was
raising,
Dallas that
just
asked the
a
question.
party.
Oh, okay. I guess we'll find out if we need an instruction. No, we didn't need an instruction. So like I mentioned, these names and descriptions are sent to the AI as part of its instruction set. So I almost always do put a rule when I add a tool just to help solidify how and when the tool should be called. But just the fact of having a tool with a description makes it aware of its existence, and it can use it. The assistant can use it when it deems that it needs to. All right, that's all that I have prepared for the training. So how are we doing on timing? We've got 4 minutes left, but Yasin and I can stay as long as you guys need. So any questions, happy to answer them. We get them all taken
Yeah,
care of
also
during
like
the-
if you don't have any questions, just so you know, the recording of this video will be made available to you. And also another thing is we are curious, what do you want us to focus on the next training? I think you're the perfect people to tell us, okay, just do this. So after this training, I will send you a short survey, like please answer it with what do you want to see next, pretty much. Like if you want to focus on a specific area, we can do it for you. So yeah. In the meantime, like, are there any questions?
Here's a question if we have time, and that has to do with integration with the new evaluations system. I'm seeing the thumbs up, thumbs down on certain queries from, I guess, the customer service assistant, but is there anything further you might want to say, Nathan, about the evaluation process now?
Yeah, so the evaluation system hasn't been fully integrated into the assistants yet. We definitely have plans for that. So right now, just to speak to what you mentioned, the only time that you get evaluations or feedback is from knowledge-based questions. But in the future, in the hopefully near future, you'll be able to have entire assistant conversations show up in evaluations, and potentially choose which messages to ask for feedback on. I think it would be pretty overwhelming if every message from the assistant had feedback options. A lot of the answers in a natural conversation are just too trivial for that to make sense. So we have to put some thought into that, but definitely it will be useful for the entire conversation to be flagged for an evaluation, or to be able to ask the user, to have a tool to ask the user to evaluate the conversation at some certain points. But that's up and coming. So for right now, it's just knowledge-based questions. Okay. All right. It doesn't sound like there's anything else. So thank you guys very much for showing up. As I mentioned, we're very eager to work with you to solve any problems you find with this, help you learn how to better use it, troubleshoot if you're having if you're building assistants that aren't doing what you're saying. There's an opportunity right now while we're evolving this brand new capability to really get a lot of in-depth engagement with us while we try and work out all the kinks and file off all the edges. So hope to hear from you. Thank you very much for showing up.
Thank
I'm
you.
very impressed with what
Thank
I've
you.
seen. Guys, great work.
Yeah, me too.
Looking
All
forward
right.
to playing with it.
Thanks, Dallas. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Thank
See you.
you. Bye bye.